A brief summary of the Middle Ages, Europe from Rome to the Renaissance, by M. Bogart Ministries. The Dark Age, or the Early Middle Ages. The collapse of Roman civilization in Western Europe was followed by a dark age of barbarian invasion, settlement, and supremacy, lasting around 300 years. The new barbarian kingdoms included Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Lombards, Franks, and the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms in Britain. These Germanic kingdoms all eventually converted to Catholic Christianity and formed an alliance with the Church. The main civilizing factors during this dark period were the Christian Church and the manorial system. The Church preserved learning and the arts, mainly in the cathedral cities and in monastic houses, which began to form after the year 500. It also supplied strong leadership and organization during the dark years of chaos and deterioration. Manorialism was built around the nucleus of wealthy and powerful estates called manors, which usually contained a fortified villa and surrounding lands with associated industries. Together, these elements formed a unit which was virtually self-contained. The High Middle Ages. The time between 1000 and 1300 are often thought of as the High Middle Ages. During these years, kings and nobles provided enough stability so that people could think beyond simple survival. New land was reclaimed from swamps, forests, and in Holland, even from the sea. Agricultural production increased. Trade flourished. Trade guilds were formed to regulate commerce and ensure the rights of merchants and tradesmen. New products were introduced from the Middle East and beyond. Large annual trade fairs were established throughout Europe. Coinage began to replace barter as the means of exchange. Castle building made attacks on neighboring lands difficult and costly. Technology advanced, along with basic civic planning. During this time, the papacy and the Catholic Church rose to a height of power and prestige. Popes and clergy could enforce their will upon nobles through the threat of excommunication. From Rome, the Vatican administered a vast empire, including most of Western Europe. Gothic architecture expressed worship through ambitious new designs and building techniques. Catholics from across Europe were able to unite around the common venture of the Crusades. Scholasticism. Re-contact with the Byzantine East and the Muslim world during the Crusades. The writings of the ancient Greeks, especially Aristotle, were rediscovered, studied, and debated. Scholars were attracted to the life of learning centered around major cathedrals. This advance in scholarship developed into scholasticism, which attempted to understand and explore all subject areas under the guidance of theology. Jewish scholasticism, or Maimonides, and Muslim scholasticism, or Averroes, interacted and argued with Catholic scholastics, like Thomas Aquinas, over the meaning and application of Aristotelian thought to contemporary issues. Christian scholastics debated whether Aristotle and other Greek thinkers could be helpful or even compatible with Christian thought and teachings. Major universities such as Oxford, Cambridge, and Paris were founded through the work of the scholastics. During the High Middle Ages, feudalism began to lose its important function as the basis for society. Cities were reinvigorated and began to expand. Peasants began to leave the land, moving to cities to find a new life. Strong kings and nobles could afford to raise standing armies through tax revenues. This allowed kings to be less dependent upon vassals for military support, enabling them to gain greater control over their domains. The Late Middle Ages. The 14th century saw several setbacks to the progress of the High Middle Ages. The 100 Years' War between England and France drained both countries of resources. The ravages of the bubonic plague killed between a quarter and a third of Europe's population. These things, along with series of serious natural disasters, caused the population of Europe to decrease and social progress to slow down drastically. In this period, the power of the nobility was reduced as kings imposed their will and made alliances with the merchants of the growing middle class. These strong central governments gave rise to the nations of modern Europe. At the same time, the power and prestige of the papacy was damaged by popular reaction to the setbacks of the later Crusades and by the refusal of kings to be intimidated by Vatican threats of excommunication. Movements like the one led by Francis of Assisi to criticize the wealth of the Catholic Church began a rethinking of Christian practice and church allegiance. The revival of the classical viewpoint, known as humanism, began to take hold in the universities and other places as theological views were questioned and debated. This would give rise to the humanistic renaissance beginning around 1400s in Italy. The Middle Ages came to a close through the innovations of Renaissance, the discovery and exploration of the Americas, and the drastic rethinking of Christianity in the Protestant Reformation. By the mid-1400s, with the Renaissance in full bloom, the Middle Ages would effectively come to an end.